In this clip, I will be discussing four concepts: traducianism, soul switching, soul ties, and dissociation. The purpose of this video is to interpret their world and which might be pertinent to the listener's worldview. I integrate religion and spirituality in my consultation and practice. This approach, as some may know, their organization, and this is because several studies have consistently shown that up to 95% of all persons, and some studies have shown a higher percentage of all persons, that integrate religion and spirituality in the way they interpret their life and existence. More importantly, religious and spiritual philosophies inform the way that many persons engage their problems and apply their religious and philosophical tenets in their decision-making process. Traducianism, possession, soul switching, soul ties, and dissociation have a religious, spiritual, and theological underpinning. An understanding of these concepts provide a framework within which the individual could better understand some of the underlying attraction mechanisms that we are currently discussing. These concepts point to a unique ability of humans for transitioning between other humans as electrical systems. The first concept, traducianism, is a belief held by the Roman Catholic Church that the souls of the parents enter into the child at birth. This suggests that either the child is born soulless or that the child possesses three soul or three soul aspects. And with respect to the soul, there are several kinds of religious philosophies out there that seek to explain the origin of the soul and at what point a human being or a fetus gets a soul. So, for example, in some cultures, when a child is born, the child is considered to be a changeling, meaning this child could be either a new person, entirely new person, or the child could be someone from a previous life. And the child is considered and examined for about 8 days, after which the child is allowed to engage with other persons outside the immediate family. And this is a practice that is considered and performed in several African religions. It was also similar to practices held by other indigenous groups and tribes in the New World, and definitely in other regions around the world. So the concept of the soul is a very important one, and it has some bearings on how we understand the underlying neurological mechanisms that are involved in the process of attraction. Now, the concept of traducianism is an ancient belief, but one that has pervaded many cultures, at times with very slight variations. The concept of traducianism was found to be existing in ancient Egypt, Greece, and ancient Rome, and it hinged on the belief that the souls of the dead returned to exist in the souls of living persons, and that these dead souls energized the souls of the living host or entity. From this conceptualization of energizing the souls of the living, so the souls of the dead energizing the souls of the living, there also emerged the concept of demonizing or demonization. So the word that was used for to explain the principle of traducianism was demonizing, or to be energized by a demon. In this sense, not an entity that is foreign to the human dynamics, but really a soul, a dead soul, and in many cases a malevolent soul that came back and possessed their host and energized the host in much the same way electrical energy energizes a device. The concept of traducianism has been prevalent in many societies and cultures, and it continues to persist in modern times with some variations and sometimes called by different names. The essential element of the conceptualization of traducianism is the belief that a foreign soul could exist in another person and energize the host. This conceptualization is also linked to the three other concepts of possession, soul switching, and dissociation, and to some extent soul ties, which we will explore in more details in later clips. Now, possession, for example, is primarily related to belief systems, and it is always couched, very often couched, within religious interpretation, but possessions is based on the concept of traducianism. In the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorder, or the DSM-4 and 5, possession is included as a dissociative condition linked to personality disorders. Again, there is an underlying conceptualization that the personality of the patient is altered, largely by the perception of the sufferer. So sometimes the patient themselves think that they are overpowered or possessed by some other alien entity, some alien entity or other person, sometimes alive or dead, and sometimes in many cases multiple personalities. And this carries over into what is commonly called in lay language multiple personality disorders. What happens is that the personality changes based on whoever the person is associating the characteristics with. So one personality will demonstrate a particular set of behavior, and this would be different from the underlying personality of the sufferer, of someone who is defined as being possessed or having a disorder of possession. And this disorder of possession, it suggests, at least in the perception of the sufferer, or family members and close friends who may interpret their illness as possession by other entities that are foreign to the person who is the host. Now, dissociation related to trauma occurs when a core segment of the brain shuts down as a defense mechanism in the presence of trauma. So it is not uncommon for people to dissociate to deal with traumatic events, and sometimes the extent of the trauma and the strength of the dissociation results in phenomenon that is described sometimes as possessions. It is also related to multiple personality disorders, and to the layman it will be described as the person being taken over by a foreign entity or someone other than the person who is the host of these different personalities. Psychologists and psychiatrists believe that dissociation points to neurological dysfunctionalities, but that religious and spiritual beliefs might color the sufferer's interpretation, but more so the interpretation of persons closely related to the sufferer, and where they may define this neurological dysfunctionality as a possession or as a being demonized by malevolent spirits, souls, dead souls, or other entities. There appears to be widespread belief or disbelief with regards to spiritual phenomena. This might be due to an absence of understanding the relationship between what is defined as religious and spiritual phenomena and scientific study, research, and evidence. And as we seek to bridge the gap between belief systems so that the listener has a framework that they could use to understand what is happening in their lives, they apply these belief systems to explain and interpret what they are experiencing or what they perceive others around them are experiencing. So we will stop at this time with this clip, and we will continue in the next clip to discuss concepts of traducianism, possessions, soul ties, and soul switching, as well as dissociation.